This is the network service of the NTA. We'll be joining our outside broadcast crew for another live broadcast.
To sustain its oversight of the banking system, to ensure continued resilience, safety, and soundness of the financial system. Price and other developments. Headline inflation year-on-year declined to 22.22% in June 2025 from 22.97% in May, primarily driven by the moderation in energy prices, especially cooking gas, wood, charcoal, and diesel. Food inflation year-on-year, however, rose to 21.97% in June 2025 from 21.14% in May, attributed mainly to the increase in the cost of processed food. Core inflation, that is, all items less farm produce and energy, also increased to 22.76% in June 2025 from 22.28% in May, reflecting an uptick in the cost of information and communication, housing and utilities, and personal care and social services. On a month-on-month basis, headline inflation rose to 1.68% from 1.53%, largely due to increases in the price of services and imported food. The committee acknowledged the efforts of the federal government in improving security and its impact on food production. Members thus urged the government to continue its support towards timely provision of high-yielding seedlings, fertilizers, and other critical inputs for the current farming season. The MPC also noted the sustained stability in the foreign exchange market, accentuated by improved capital flows, earnings from increased crude oil production, rising non-oil exports, and significant reduction in aggregate imports. Real GDP in the first quarter of 2025 grew by 3.13% compared with 2.27 and 3.38% in the corresponding and preceding quarters of 2024, respectively. In addition, recent data on the Purchasing Managers' Index indicates that the Nigerian economy remains on an expansionary path. The external sector also remains stable and resilient, despite persisting uncertainties in the global macroeconomic environment. Gross external reserves rose to 40.11 billion on July 18, 2025, representing about 9.5 months of import cover for goods. Global developments. Available projections suggest that global output recovery continues at a gradual pace. However, recent developments, especially the persistent tariff war and the geopolitical tensions, may continue to disrupt supply chains and exert upward pressure on the price of imports. Disinflation in the advanced economies has slowed, prompting major central banks to be cautious of upside risks to inflation. In the emerging markets, central banks continue to calibrate monetary policy to their domestic conditions, noting the persistent risks to inflationary pressures. Outlook. Staff projections indicate a further decline in inflation in the coming months, underpinned by the current tight monetary policy stance, stable exchange rate, declining PMS prices, and moderation in food prices as the harvest season approaches. Given the persistent uncertainty in the policy environment and underlying price pressures, monetary policy will need to maintain its current stance until risks to inflation recede sufficiently. The committee remains committed to the bank's price stability mandate and would take appropriate measures to foster stability and confidence in the economy. The next meeting of the committee is scheduled for Monday, 22nd and Tuesday, 23rd of September, 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. That was communique number 158, presented by the chairman of the MPC and the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Olayemi Kadusu. We'll now take questions from members of the press. State your medium, your name, and ask your question. No multi-pronged questions, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Governor, sir. Good afternoon, the management team. Sarah Achimugu, Channels TV. Recently, the IMF board concluded its Article 4 consultation on Nigeria, where it commended both the fiscal and the monetary side of the economy for some of its reforms in the last 2 years. Would like to know what your assessment of that is, and then if you have recommendations as well of their findings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And I know that Channels has been covering these matters for many years, way before I came into this seat. But for the benefit of our viewers, I think it may be important to say something about why the Article 4 of the IMF is important. Article 4 is important because you find the IMF is considered a credible institution. And whatever the IMF says what it comes out with, potential investors are interested. Many take a cue from that in making their decisions. And by the way, let me not restrict it to the IMF alone. There are other institutions that on a regular basis, perhaps you may argue not as rigorously and in depth as the IMF would do, but there are other institutions that do similar things. For example, you hear regularly of the rating agencies. The last one that did something on Nigeria, to the best of my knowledge, is Moody's. And they really had stayed away from looking at this for a while. So they did do their own review on Nigeria, and very happily they gave us an upgrade, which is in line with what others have been doing. Again, to re-emphasize, these are the things that potential investors take a cue from. Very important to them. Now, I would say that the findings of these institutions are really not dissimilar. They are not dissimilar. There's a feeling that the Nigerian authorities have taken bold, transformative measures to help to properly reposition the macroeconomic fundamentals of the country. There's the general feeling that they've moved, and you talk about the monetary side in particular, we've moved towards the monetization, the discontinuation of the monetization of fiscal deficits. The foreign exchange market is working a lot better and more smoothly, with the result of which it has encouraged inflows into that market. Of course, reference is constantly being made to the fact that Nigeria has moved away from the very difficult situation where there were subsidies on the foreign exchange and, I beg your pardon, on the fuel subsidies, on the fuel side. And of course, reference is made to the fact that these measures, painful though they may be, have resulted in stability in the foreign exchange market. There's positivity with our trade surplus, and it has restored investor confidence. So I think those are all things that have been able to demonstrate, okay, across the board, not just with the IMF, but across the board, that the policies that we have embarked upon are bringing out results, and that inflation is gradually coming under greater control. And very importantly, Nigerians are having greater confidence in their own currency. I was quite struck in having a discussion with somebody just yesterday, and he showed me a dialogue that he had with his travel agent, where he was owing the travel agent some money, and the travel agent said, please, I know you normally give me my money in dollars, but I'm very happy to take it in naira. Those are the things that are happening across the board. You all, as members of the press, have been covering these activities for a very long time. A lot of what you see going on now is transformational, and they are here to stay. the differences that we had between the parallel market rate and the official rate, you can all see it yourselves. Some of the banks are now allowing you to use your Naira cards when you travel. Those things are here to stay. They are not a short-term measure. They are here to stay. And as I said, as more and more of vigilance, transparency, rebuilding trust, I'm very, very confident that we can only but have an improvement in the positive signals that we have seen coming out and that the IMF and others are also noting. You spoke about recommendations, and yes, there are recommendations, okay, for us to, of course, build more resilience. In other words, you may be here today, but you have to ensure that you are building sufficient buffers for uncertainties into the future. There's also the recommendation to ensure that you stay the course, that you do not start something that you cannot finish. And of course, we will not do that. And I know many of you have heard me say that severally. We will not do that. We will ensure that that collaboration that is necessary to reduce uncertainty, because let's face it, nobody likes to invest in places where there's potential to lose money. They come in where the environment is enabling. And we have to be consistent in all our policy thrusts and all the things we do to give the confidence to the outside investing public and, of course, to Nigerians as well.
Good afternoon, Mr. Governor and members of the NPC. I am Nancy Naji, the anchor of Moneyline Nancy on AIT. My question to you, Governor, is around the year-on-year headline inflation, which you referenced earlier, easing marginally from about 22.97% to 22.22% in June. However, we're seeing that the month-on-month, which you also acknowledged, accelerated to 1.68% from 1.53%, suggesting that there's still that persisting underlying price pressures. So my question now is, how is the central bank recalibrating its monetary policy toolkit to ensure that the disinflation trend that we're seeing is not just statistical, but structurally sustained? Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, and it's a good question. Let me first start off by saying that at the central bank, we recognize that our policy toolkit is working, therefore inflation is coming down. However, we also recognize that our goal is to ensure that we get to single-digit inflation. So much as it is coming down, we're still determined to ensure that we bring it down to single-digit. So I want to say that up front. Let us also remind ourselves a little bit about where we're coming from, because I think it's very important to put the proper context and for us to understand where we're coming from, that will give a good view, a better view of where we're going to. We're coming from a situation of enormous money supply. Enormous money supply. And I've spoken about this in different fora. I've spoken about the huge injections that went into our economy from ways and means, unprecedented and probably difficult to find any other place to compare it with. I've also spoken about the huge intervention injections that went into our economy and still, quite frankly, are with us. Those things are of such a proportion that they just simply do not disappear overnight. So those are some of the challenges that we have to cope with. And that is why our response to this is that we are, of course, operating a very tight monetary situation. We have absolutely no choice but to do that. It's at a cost, but it needs to be done. If we are going to achieve the single-digit inflation rate I spoke about earlier, these are part of the measures. In addition to that, I want to say that there are upsides and positives that will complement the work of the central bank. For example, we are aware that for a while there have been issues with respect to revenue coming in from the oil and gas side. Now there are very, very positive shoots coming out on that. We see that the NMPC has, for the first time since January of this year, has published the fact, we'll be made aware of the fact that we are meeting our OPEC quota. That's very good news. It's very good news. And it all adds to the very, very, very positive trajectory ahead. Of course, there's also greater transparency with respect to NMPC and its earnings, and of course, it coming in to the to its account and to the monetary authorities. I saw something on television just before I came in here where they were publishing their monthly profit. That's also very encouraging. It's very encouraging. So I think some of these areas will basically help to bring down the inflation that we are talking about. We are also ensuring that the handshake that is supposed to take place between the fiscal and monetary side, which is very, very, very important, the close coordination that needs to take place between the two is going to continue. And I was privileged again to have been called on to address the NMPC's first retreat, in which we had very, very useful discussions, and which I believe show for greater collaboration as we go along. We will continue to use our tools, the MPR, the CRR, ensuring that the foreign exchange market works efficiently. We are going to continue to do that, and you can rely on us for that. And of course, the inflation expectations, we will manage them in such a way that we are as transparent and open as possible, so that people understand, the various publics understand where we are heading to. But in summary, we are determined to ensure that we use all the different tools at our disposal to bring down inflation to single-digit levels.
Good afternoon, Mr. Governor. My name is Nduka Chejin of the Nation newspaper. The IMF has warned of declining commodity prices and shrinking fiscal buffers. And as structural factors like food, supply shocks, and high energy costs continue to drive inflation, how is the central bank positioning itself to mitigate the external shocks while also working with key stakeholders to address these challenges? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Again, back to the issue of prices. Okay, and maybe one should try and put this in a very simple context. Now, obviously, when they're talking about prices, they are largely referring, I take it, to oil prices. Okay, and how do we create buffers in case oil prices diminish? As far as I can see, the downside is yes, oil prices may diminish, and they've been volatile, as we've all seen, for reasons that are beyond everybody here. Okay, international uncertainties, which we all know. Now, that production has gone up the way it has, in my view, is a very, very positive, gives a very, very positive outlook. It gives a very, very positive outlook. And we are hearing double-digit figures for some of the concessions that are going on. We are hearing double-digit figures relative to when they were acquired. And that is happening in a relatively short space of time. So, to my mind, that, which could be a combination of efficiency as well as tighter control around security, has beefed up production. I was saying earlier on that we have reached our benchmark for OPEC ceiling, and there's positivity looking forward. So I think that as far as that is concerned, I believe those things have the potential to more or less moderate themselves. I would also say that we have done a lot to diversify our base, and it's something I've spoken about numerous times to various audiences. And I don't want any of you to underestimate the contribution that we get from the diaspora remittances. I'm also so proud to say, because at the time we started this journey, and we recognized the need to diversify our reserve base, we were at nowhere. We were at nowhere. And relative to the significant gains we are making today, we have a lot to be proud about. I know in particular that now that we have introduced the non-resident BVN, you will see the game changing. You will see the game changing. Now the diasporans can open their accounts from the comfort of their homes, and they can transact with banks. And if many of you are paying attention, you will find that the banks have started the process of advertising. So we have done what we should do, which is act as a catalyst to ensure that this happens. And it is happening. It is beginning to happen. Believe me, the numbers are showing us it is beginning to happen. Okay? And I believe that if we continue in that trajectory, we will have absolutely no cause to worry about the issue of uncertainties and all that, because we are able to create, with all this, we are able to create better buffers, which is perhaps the reason why we are happy to announce the 40 billion in excess of reserves, which we have hit as of today. And also, for all of you who may have forgotten, if you recall, more recently, when there was turmoil in emerging markets as a result of the threats of using tariffs, okay, which became a misnomer in the environment, a lot of the emerging market currencies suffered. They tanked. Ours did not. Ours did not. We held steady. So I think we are getting to a stage where the numbers will begin to speak for themselves. I may not have to say too much of this any longer. The numbers themselves will tell you exactly what is going on.
Good afternoon, Mr. Governor. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Musa Abubakar with NTA. Following the release of the recent Purchase and Managers Index, some reports have drawn a connection between rising input costs and a potential increase in inflation, suggesting that the CBN has raised concerns. Could you clarify on the bank's position on this?
First, let me just clarify that this does not represent the view of the central bank at all. It does not. I think it's very important to state this. The PMI reflects the sentiments and expectations of business across the sectors from industry to service to agriculture. Okay. It does not by any means represent the views of the central bank. However, what we see is the fact that, yes, there has been an increase in input, okay, which some may feel could result in an increase in inflation. And that would be the conventional thinking easily. However, in this particular case, what we find has happened is that the increase in input has been absorbed by the manufacturers themselves, by the states, by the actors themselves. Rather than passing it on to the consumers, they've absorbed it themselves. Now, what does this mean as far as we can see? We think that that's a good thing. It's good for competition. It shows that there's the possibility of constraining margins and also keeping inflation in check. So from our perspective, I think that is a good thing, and it's one that we believe will encourage competition and customer retention.
Thank you, Mr. Governor. My name is James Emejo with This Day. With the recapitalization deadline now about 8 months away, and given that the CBN recently introduced time-bound measures, several banks still transitioning from the temporary regulatory forbearance granted them in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, could you provide an update on the status of the exercise? And how would you assess the strength and resilience of institutions under your regulatory purview? Many thanks, Mr. Governor.
Thank you very much. Let me say that already 8 banks have surpassed the minimum required. 8 banks have surpassed the minimum required. And let me also say that in addition to that, we have 1 bank that has raised a significant amount of money on the London Stock Exchange. That clearly is a reflection of the way that the international investors view the banking system. And I was again very privileged to have a conversation with a good number of them about 3 or 4 weeks before this listing took place. And really and truly, a lot of interest, I must say, a lot of interest internationally on putting money on the Nigerian financial system. A lot of interest. The key thing is that we, as regulators, will continue to play our part to ensure that the system and the players and the actors continue to do what we are doing, creating resilience, creating buffers, and of course, playing by the rules. because that is so important for those who are looking to invest, that they can believe and they trust in you. Now, it's important that I say this because you have to understand that people that put in so much money in investments don't do so lightly. They are rigorous in the way they examine the financials, in the way they look at the industry, in the conclusions they draw. So it's beyond just the governor of the central bank said this, or the IMF and the rating agencies say that. They themselves do their own extensive and rigorous look at the situations, because they again, unlike others, they are looking at so many different countries and nobody wants his money to go down the tubes. So in spite of everything, in spite of the difficulties that Nigeria may have had over the past 3 years or so, there's a recognition that we've walked out of that and that we are now fit for investment by the international community. This is very, very important. The steps we've taken, okay, are temporary ones. And with respect to forbearances that you refer to, they are all temporary ones, and really and truly are in line with Basel requirements all over the world. It's nothing that is unique to Nigeria. Absolutely nothing unique to Nigeria. That we've asked some of the banks to ensure that the provisioning strategies are in line with what should help them to create the buffers to ensure that dividends are not paid and that investments are kept in abeyance for a certain period of time. This is normal. There's nothing new about that. It is very normal, okay, and is well in line with our oversight functions. Happily, and as I said, the numbers should, not only with us, but even with the banking system, should begin to speak for themselves. The capital adequacy ratio, 13%, and of course the NPLs exceeds the 50%, and liquidity levels are 50% and NPLs at the 5% threshold. So I think in those terms, our banking system is really and truly come of age, and I believe is fit for purpose, and can only but get better. Can only but get better. That's really my view, and I'm taking this view largely, again, riding on the back of the discussion, not just from what we see, but the discussions that those internationally see who have been following Nigeria for many years, by the way. These are not just people that came up from nowhere. They've been following the situation for many years. They've seen the peaks, they've seen the troughs, and they've seen that this is an opportunity now for them to come in.
Thank you, Mr. Governor, sir. I have a question from Bukola Arulambo of Leadership Newspapers from Lagos. Permit me, sir, to ask the question on her behalf. She writes, Mr. Governor, sir, last week, the CBN issued a call for research proposals under its Knowledge Accelerated program. Could you share the thinking behind this initiative and what the bank hopes to achieve with it? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bukola from Lagos. So I'm not alone here. Thank you. You know, I've always felt that the central bank has fallen a little bit behind with respect to some of the things it should be doing, beyond just the naira and kobo and the dollars and cents that we've all been involved and spent so much time talking about. People go to bed at night looking at the exchange rate. They wake up in the morning worrying about the reserve level, and basically you will be forgiven for thinking that that is all the central bank is meant to do. you will be forgiven. I want to assure you that it is much more than that. It's much more than that. Within the bank, we have had considerable discussions around how to strengthen our thought leadership, because we do believe that we have very good people within the bank, and we should push them forward and show leadership in respect of a number of the things we do. And in actual fact, some of the things we don't do also we should be talking about. Some of the things we don't do we should be talking about. So the whole idea is not just to leave it to the internals, but also to carry people along as we are going through.
Although social media as a channel of communication is inherently harmless, it becomes harmful and damaging when used without discretion and thoughtfulness. Bad social media users spread rumors.
There are other things that are ongoing as well. We're looking to how to strengthen and improve the various channels we have internally for debate, the various channels we have for capacity building, for people to express themselves, for people to challenge particular issues. All those are ongoing. And as we go along, it will even extend to more things. Like, for example, we're looking at the whole relationship between the payments side, the fintechs, okay, and how they impact the financial system, some of them doing extremely well. How can we aid and support them? Okay, we need to have conversations around that. Of course, we are also very mindful of the role that the central bank should play as a dominant organization on the sub-region. Okay, so the list goes on and on and on. So my answer to you on this is, please watch that space. You'll be hearing a lot more from us at the central bank, a lot more. We'll be moving from how you may have traditionally been seeing us over the past few years as that of, oh, let me go and sort myself out with naira and kobo and dollars and cents. And I remember when I took over, I said, people will no longer need to know anybody in the central bank to get their job done. I say it again, you will not need to know anybody in the central bank to get your job done. I think we're already moving in that direction. And that is why we even encourage the many of the customers that come here that belong to the banks to go back to the banks. Don't come here because there's nothing for you here. You know, you don't need to be here. There's nothing to sort you out here for. Nothing. Okay. But in terms of those who want to have debate, have discussion, raise the bar in terms of policy, you'll see more of that coming out from the central bank. That's for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Governor, sir, Chairman of the MPC and Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. This brings us to the end of this press briefing. Thank you all for coming, and see you in September.
You must be really serious with this, your